Hello everyone, I'm Philip and welcome back to another video regarding the UCAT. So today we're going to be going through decision making. So you know that last time I actually ended up going through verbal reasoning, and now we're just going to move along that sort of order now from verbal reasoning to decision making. And the next videos I'll be releasing will probably be associated with quantitative reasoning and abstract reasoning. So just before I get started, I just want to sort of like put everything into context. I'm seeing that my face is really freaking fat. That's not that good. But the thing is that actually I'm in a new area now. So last time you saw me, I was in Nha Trang at like this really nice sort of beach hotel, and I was not really beach hotel, but I was by the beach and I was sitting outdoors in a balcony, on a balcony, and I do have a balcony here, but the issue is that there are no chairs. So I'm just gonna sit inside right here, and hopefully I can still give you guys a decent lesson. It's a really nice view. I'll probably chuck some photos there if I do decide to do like a bit of vlogging in addition to UCAT teaching. But anyways, without further ado, I'm just looking at myself and I'm just realizing how much I really need to like properly go on my diet. I told myself I'd be having 1,600 calories, but today I might have blown it. Probably go for a run later. But anyways, without further ado, let's actually just go towards the actual teaching. So as you can see right here, we're on to the next sort of PowerPoint now, and I do apologize. So I actually just ended up leaving the word reasoning there. So it's actually UCAT decision making, not UCAT decision making reasoning introduction. That is entirely incorrect. And I do apologize for that. So we're going through decision making today. Before I just get into everything, I just want to point out as well that I still do offer, private and group tutoring as well. And it's just a link right there. It's going to be in the description of the video as well. So if you go to that link, you'll be able to find my credentials there, and you'll be able to contact me just with any inquiries that you may have regarding my videos, or you can just simply contact me as well for private or group tutoring for the UCAT. That is still available, and that's always going to be offered here. The idea is that I just want you guys to just get an idea of what lessons I can offer and also what I can actually end up teaching as well. So without further ado, let's just go on to the introduction for decision making. So I want to give you guys just a quick overview of what's going to be discussed today. So it's just pretty much the exact same structure as the verbal reasoning previously. So we're going to start off by just talking about the general premise and structure of decision making, then going on to the question types. And by the way, there are many question types. Like really, I can't wait to show you guys how many there are. Timing, which varies massively. Marking, what you need to score, and also just the final summary. Okay, so without further ado, let's actually go on to the general premise and structure now. So decision making is pretty much just an extraordinarily jam-packed section that involves the use of logical deductions or deductive reasoning, and that's why I call it decision making, in order to solve questions. So pretty much the idea is that you're going to be using logic in order to solve questions and everything. And of course, other sections as well, they do have a very high emphasis on logic, but decision making by far the most when it comes to logic. So in terms of the timing, you actually, in Australia, have 29 questions to answer in 32 minutes. And if we just pile up the maths there, you can see right there, it's just 1.103 minutes, and that's about 66 seconds per question. But then the thing is that when we just discuss the timing for it, we just end up simplifying it to over 1 minute per question. If you're from the UK as well, you're going to notice that actually the time is 31 minutes. It's just because they change the timing in Australia to 32 minutes, which we'll discuss about later, but pretty much it's the exact same thing. Of course, though, the extra minute helps. So now continuing on with a bit about the structure as well still. So there are actually 10 different question types. So 10 different types of question types. Remember, for verbal reasoning, we had only 2 different types of questions. And the thing is that as well, very importantly, they actually are dispersed in a very specific and constant order. So it's not going to be one of those things where you can just have like one question and you never know what's going to be next. You can have like another question type. You actually just have the consistent question types going on from there. And you usually can predict the actual general order, at least within 2019, 2020, and what I've been seeing with 2021 and 22 as well. And the issue is that actually this creates time traps. I'm going to talk about that in a later video, but there are potential time traps, which are very important to note. And also I want to say as well, the amount of certain types of questions are always constant. So we're going to have 10 different question types, and they can be split into different subtypes. And also the actual amount of these questions for each type, they're generally about the same as well. So that's something that's actually very important to note. One of the extra little points here, which I really want to point out as well, is the fact that this is actually a very, very highly practicable section, okay? Practicable section. So pretty much, unlike verbal reasoning, which is just a bit more innate, you actually can just practice this very much well, and you'll be able to get a very, very high score. So there are actually many, many, many tips and tricks that you can use in order to maximize your marks, and those will all be discussed in a later sort of video. But there are many, many techniques that you can use, and I'm going to sort of like maybe give you guys a bit of like a hint or like a taste of what you can actually do. But there are so many tips, and it is very possible for anyone with constant good practice to be able to get a nice score of around 750 or 800 as well. So yeah, moving on to the actual question types now. So I did mention there were a lot of question types, and I've got 3 different slides for this, so please bear with me. So I mentioned before that there are 10 different types of question types for decision making. Sorry, you can see right there that I did actually end up trying to just do a little copy and paste here and there of like the paragraphs and everything to making the videos a bit simpler. And I actually left it as a verbal reasoning, but it is in fact decision making. I apologize, and I'll edit that later. For decision making, some question types can be split into question subtypes, and now we're going to actually explore each of them separately, but not necessarily in a lot of detail. It's just a brief introduction, which is what this is. But I can remind you guys they do get split up into different subtypes, which are very important. So the first one I want to discuss are the yes/no, the direct deduction, logical deduction questions. And pretty much what you have here is that you're going to have 5 statements for which you need to choose yes or no. And this is based off the directs of very, very strong logical deductions that you make following reading a small series of phrases. So they give you like a small series of phrases. From there, you make logical deductions. And then from there, you have 5 statements and you choose yes or no for them. This is a very common type of question, and I'm going to show you examples later. Also, there are the yes/no textual comprehension logical deduction questions. And it's very similar to the previous type, though that is, I apologize for that, though it actually has softer logical deductions following the reading of a comprehension text. So what I mean is that you're more actually not really doing like really strong logical deductions like, oh, you know, one step to the next. It's more like softer, more like inferences as opposed to sort of like pure deductions and everything. And the idea is that, as in the name right there, I've named it as that because pretty much you're going to be reading a comprehension text. So it's similar to like this decision, verbal reasoning, and then you can have the 5 statements after as well. Okay, so the next part right here are the yes/no graphical comprehension logical deduction questions. So it's similar to the textual comprehension. You have soft logical deductions, but except you actually have reading graphs and tabulated information. So literally graphs and tabulated stuff. And this is actually a bit of a chore, but I'll talk to you guys about that later. So those are the yes/no sort of questions there. Another question type which exists are the logical puzzles. And this is the comparison order variation. So pretty much the idea is that it's like a puzzle. It's like you got to solve for something. And the idea is that you're using logic to solve for that. And the idea is that what you're solving for is actually the comparison of something to something else or the order of something in a sequence. So it's like Maria is earning 20 pounds. How much is this person earning compared to Maria? Like 30 pounds more, something like that. The idea is that you're going to be getting an answer that's kind of like that. You're using comparisons in order to actually, your answer is going to be like a comparison and everything. So to some examples, because I don't want to just give you the 10 examples and then just flood you. So we're going to first show you the example of the yes/no direct deduction, logical deduction question, okay? So as you can see right here, this is exactly what I stated. So you have a series of statements right here. And then these are kind of like, you know, you're making very direct logical deductions towards them because it's not really flowery. It's very direct. As you can see, they're very, very didactic, I guess. They don't really waste time beating around the bush. They just say it as it is. Very direct, very clear, very clinical. 5 statements, and you choose yes or no to them. And there are, of course, lots of techniques for them, and I'll discuss those in a later video. The source of this is the official UCAT question bank. So these questions, you know, are approved by the UCAT as well. These are the premier questions that you can get, or at least ones that can be reflected in the UCAT exam. I do believe Medify is more premier, but then just for the sake of just getting you guys questions, I've gone there. Next one that I'm going to be looking at are the yes/no textual comprehension logical deduction questions. So these ones here, as you can see, they actually involve a text. So instead of just having pure statements, which you're making very strong deductions from, you just have a text. And in fact, as I mentioned, your deductions are going to be weaker. So it's just going to be like more inferences and everything. If you were to go here and try to do this question right now, you're going to notice that you have very weak sort of inferences that sort of lead you to your answer. It's not very concrete and clear, but you still have the same yes/no sort of style and everything, which is very important to actually state. Another type of question are the yes/no graphical comprehension logic deduction questions. These ones really, really suck and everything, and I'll talk to you guys about this later, but these ones really suck. Pretty much the idea is that you just have a graph or like a table, or maybe even a graph and table. You're making interpretations of the graph and table, and I guess it's kind of in between. It's kind of like half inference, half more direct as well. You're kind of sitting in the middle. It's not necessarily a very strong one. It's not necessarily very weak. but then at the same time, you are making some medium level deductions right here. But then the thing is, it's very tiresome and it can get very, very weird because of the fact that you're in that sort of in between. But notice as well, you have the 5 statements and the 5 yes or no questions as well. Source from the official UCAT question bank, like all the other questions I'll be showing you guys for today. Here's another one, the final one I was talking about. So these are the logic puzzles with comparisons and order, okay? So as you can see right here, it's just a puzzle and you're using logic to solve the puzzle. You probably recognize these things from like if you did like say one of those like whatever they call them, like intuition IQ test or something like that, then you're going to notice they have questions like these as well, like, oh, this person's shorter than this, who's taller than this person. It's like that sort of logic puzzle and everything. But notice here that the entire subject matter and the entire premise is that you're making a comparison with each other and everything. You're making comparisons amongst others. So you're choosing the tallest and shortest. You're making comparisons or you're making an order between them, okay? So this is that sort of other variation. Now, I'm going to go through the next set of 5 questions right here, or 5 question types here. So you have another type, another 5. So you have the logic puzzles with the where is what, the who variation, okay? So the idea is pretty much just simply, you have, it's the same idea with the logic puzzle, except you actually are placing a person or object to another corresponding object. So that may not really make sense or something like that, but pretty much you are getting an object and you're comparing it to another object. So it's, for example, it's like, who owns this mitten? And you're going to say, Joshua owns this mitten. So that means that you're actually getting like a person, Joshua, say like a Joshua T, Joshua Tran or something like that. And you're sort of comparing that to another corresponding object. So you're saying Joshua Tran, he owns this mitten or something. So I'll show you guys in a moment what that is. There's another question right here. This is actually the 6th one now, where it's actually equation logic. So this is actually quite a more barren type of question, but I'll go into that later. It's pretty much what you're doing here is that you're going to be using logic to deduce a certain value of a variable in an equation using other equations. So pretty much it's just like solve for X kind of thing. So if you did maths in high school or something like that, you know those solve for the variable, solve for X questions. It's like simultaneous equations as well. You have like multiple variables and you're trying to solve for one. It's kind of like this. And actually, if you did well in high school for this, then I don't really see you guys having any issues with these questions. And these are like the sort of 3 mark ones. Here's another type of question right here. And this is actually one that really bogs students down a lot, and for good reason, because it is pretty difficult. They're the Venn diagram questions. So the questions just involving Venn diagrams, and there are many subtypes right here. So I've labeled 4 of them. In fact, there could be more, but I think I have captured the main 4 here. There are the interpretation questions. You interpret the Venn diagram. Deductions, where you're not just simply like reading and picking information, you're more actually making inferences based off the Venn diagram, or just like making like not even inferences, but just drawing conclusions from information as opposed to just like going directly. You also have creation. So literally even though it's not directly creating, in order to solve the questions, you need to create a Venn diagram, so creation, and choosing the best Venn diagram. Literally, they give you a series of Venn diagrams and you choose the best one right there. And all these questions, they use Venn diagram knowledge. If you guys are a part of the Australian curriculum, I don't know how it is in the UK, maybe even New Zealand, but in Australia, you actually learn about Venn diagrams in year 7. And that's kind of carried across later. So hopefully you guys do have that knowledge packed in here because it can help you a lot. In fact, Venn diagrams are taught, in fact, at a very young age as well. So hopefully you do have that sort of knowledge right here because it plays very well into this as well. It's a very packed question. Another type of questions are the best argument questions. You're literally given like a question or statement. It's postular. It's like, so I've ate at Lotteria today. So the thing is that just before this. So the thing is, which is why I'm getting concerned about my face fat. But it's like Lotteria, is Lotteria a sustainable fast food franchise in Vietnam or something? So that's like a question or statement is postular. It may say something like Lotteria is a fast food franchise that is popular or something and should be sustained. So it's either question or statement, and then you have a series of arguments. It can be 4 arguments, A, B, C, D, with that. And the thing is that you choose the best argument. You choose the best one that you do. And there are many techniques to choose the best argument because this can actually be very abstract, but there is a very concrete way to solve this. It's a process at the end of the day. And therefore, I say you can practice and get really good at this. So I would like to say, make sure you practice, and we'll talk about how you can optimize your practice in another video. So another type of question a series of questions are the probability analysis and logic questions. So there are some more grammar errors here. I do apologize. I was actually driving in a really rocky vehicle and I was typing, so I was making a few errors here, but hopefully the main point conveys, and here I can sort of clarify everything. But I do promise this will be corrected once I post the actual PowerPoint notes in the actual description. But you have the probability analysis and logic questions, okay? So pretty much here, you're using pretty much, you have probability. So it's like, what is a chance of this happening? What is a chance of like it raining tomorrow, or there being like a bug in like the lottery chicken or something like that? And then they give you, and then the idea is that you're using analysis and logical deductions to make conclusions about these probabilities and everything. So you're saying like, oh, yeah, you know, it's going to be like a 1 in 4 chance of it raining tomorrow because of this. And you're analyzing it and you're using logical deductions in order to solve this. So that's why I called it probability analysis and logic. Keep in mind, these are not actually official names. These are names that I've made up based on what I've seen. But what is official is the fact that there are kind of like 10 types of questions generally. And, you know, these are what they kind of are about and everything. They're all categorized, okay? And you can really, really capitalize with good practice. So now onto some examples. So here is a logic puzzle of a where is what type of question, okay? So you're pretty much, again, what you're doing is that it's logic puzzle. It's just a puzzle. You're using logic and you're trying to correspond one thing to another thing, one object or like a person to another object. And literally here, what is going on is that you're trying to correspond two people, or not necessarily two people, but a person or people to a one-room apartment. So it's like, this one-room apartment belongs to which of the following owners? And it's like, Gary and Flora, Adam. Gary and Adam, or both belong to Rose. You're literally getting the one-room apartment and you're comparing and you're trying to like mix and match between two things. So you're literally getting a room and you're sort of comparing two, and you're actually sort of like placing two people or something like that in the room. You're actually getting people and you're sort of like comparing them to that sort of room or something like that. So that's the idea of that sort of question and everything. So that's one of the other logic puzzle questions you can get. Here is an example of the equation logic question. So pretty much it's like, you know, it's not exactly how I described it as, but then the idea is pretty much the exact sort of same thing. There are slight variations, but fundamentally what you have is that you have a series of equations and you're sort of calculating, you know, for like the value or like the value of a variable, so you can sort of complete this equation. So which shape will make this last equation true? This is basically simultaneous equations in maths. They give you shapes and everything. There are multiple ways in which you can simplify this, and I'll discuss it later. But if you're good with maths, you'll be able to good with this. There is actually no reason to be intimidated by this, because if you don't know, year 10s in the school curriculum and everything are doing this. You can do this as well, if with good practice. So don't find this too daunting, okay? So, oops, that is a, whoops, that, oh, okay. So there was a bit of a mistake. Oh, okay. I thought I accidentally doubled up, but never mind. So here is another type of question right here, the Venn diagram interpretation question. So I remember how I told you can split up the Venn diagram questions into multiple subtypes. We're about to go through the subtypes right here, but a bit quicker. So Venn diagram interpretation questions, literally a Venn diagram right here, and you're making a pure interpretation of that. Literally reading off the graph right here and just directly grabbing information like here. Based on the diagram, how many employees qualify for promotion? And then the thing is that you just need to sort of just look in the shapes and everything and then figure that out. And that's pretty much how you do these Venn diagram interpretation questions. Literal, direct interpretation. Here's another type of question, the Venn diagram deduction questions. Again, a Venn diagram, except you're deducing things now. So instead of just like picking information, being like, okay, yep, 70, 23, like very direct, it's a bit more indirect. You're making more inferences and everything right here. You're sort of making deductions and drawing conclusions. So the question right here is asking, which of the following statements is true? A, cosmetic fragrance were the second highest selling product categories. Can you see that with this sort of question right here, what they're doing is that you're actually sort of like more trying to draw an inference, and then with that from there, getting conclusions. So you're more trying to like use information, interpret that, and like deduce from there and make inferences in order to solve for an overall conclusion. It's not direct plucking, as you know. All right, so that's one of the other questions. Another one is the Venn diagram creation question. Okay, so it's not literally asking you to actually create a Venn diagram. That'd be kind of whack, because it's very hard to actually draw those in an exam. But you can see right here, in order to best do this question, you actually need to create a Venn diagram yourself. So that's why I call them creation questions, because the fundamental idea is that you're going to actually be creating a Venn diagram. I know you guys got your equations and everything like that, and you know your special year 7 equations for that. But in reality, it can get very messy and everything, just sort of thinking about that. I think it's just much better for you all to just simply use equations. So much better for you all to simply use an actual physical Venn diagram and draw it all out. It makes it a lot easier, and you won't make silly mistakes as well. Because the thing is that they like to twist things, and they like to use various sort of keywords to try to trick you here. And each keyword is very important. In the rush of a UCAT exam, you might not be able to catch those keywords. And by actually drawing it out, you'll be able to catch your mistake in not having done that. So that is very important, but I'll talk about that later. You have a best Venn diagram question. So these questions suck. And again, I'll talk about that later. But pretty much they literally, you can see right here, they just say you have these statements and everything. And then the idea is that they give you a series of Venn diagrams and you choose the best Venn diagram. It literally asks you which of the diagrams best encapsulates the data. And this is it right here. It's a dreadful question, but we'll talk about that at another time. So here's a best argument question, and this is actually the question. So in this right here, they actually give you a question as like the general sort of premise. So they say, is a substantial reduction in the price of crude oil good for the world? And then as you can see right here, 4 statements and 4 arguments, and you choose the best one. But then again, there is a mold to this, okay? You don't just think to yourself, oh, that sounds pretty good. I did debating in high school. I can pick one of these instantly. No, don't do that. You want to actually use a certain mold, which I'll teach you guys in order to find the best argument for this. Okay, and that, I don't know why I clicked on that for some reason. Okay, I realized because if you click left, then actually it makes it go back. Okay, so I just need to use arrows here. Okay, and here is a probability analysis and logic question. So probability analysis and logic question. So pretty much what you have right here is, you see right here, you're just simply your probabilities. And then the thing is that you're using logic and analysis to deduce the question. So you have a coin and probability, and the probability it lands heads on the 11th row will still be P. And the thing is that you can see right here, you're just sort of like, they're like giving questions and you're sort of like trying to find which one's right, which one's like providing like a correct encapsulation of the situation. And of course, for that, you're using logical deductions in order to attempt to do that. You're using logic with probability, and that's why, and analyzing it. So they're called probability analysis and logic question. Okay, so that's that. And I keep making that mistake, my bad. And now we're going on to the final question type discussion right here. And the final decision-making question type right here, which is worth discussing, are the logic with number questions, okay? So as the name sort of says, you're just using logical deductions and you're making certain conclusions regarding numbers, okay? So literally logic and numbers, using logic to actually draw inferences and make conclusions with numbers and everything. And we can split those into the best option question types and also general interpretation. So I'll explain what those are in a moment because that can sound a bit confusing. And also, I just want to say as well, if I go into the examples for those, that there are an absolute abundance of techniques for these questions, and we'll be discussing those in later videos. There are so many techniques which you can use to optimize this. You can work your way to high score just by simply doing these techniques and everything. It's a mold. It's like a recipe. It's like following instructions to cook a sandwich or cook like chicken or something like that. It is easy. Follow the steps and you'll be fine. So this is a very practicable section. Excuse me. So here is a question, an example of the best option logic with numbers question. So the idea is that it's just logic with numbers, and they have a situation provided for you, and they give you 2 choices. It's like, oh, choice A or choice B, and your task with choosing or determining which one is a better option, or you already have an option and you're sort of arguing whether that's going to be the best option right here. So it's like, oh, in this case, is hospital B the better choice to do an X-ray? And then yes for certain criteria or no for certain criteria. You're choosing or evaluating whether something is what is the best option or whether something is the best option. So that is a very, very, it's not very common, but it is an ever-present type of question when it comes to decision-making for the UCAT. So another one as well is just the general interpretation, logic with number questions. So here's another one. And then the thing is that it's just general interpretation, okay? So it's not like you're choosing the best argument. It's just like, oh, okay, you're just simply using logic in order to make deductions and interpretations and deductions about something in order to find an answer. And it's just related to numbers and everything. So how many baskets does Susie have of these eggs and everything? It's just pure numbers, and you're using logic to sort of interpret and make deductions from there to determine how many baskets does Susie have. Okay, so it's a simple question type, but it can get some people here. And it's a bit more sparse as well. It's not as packed or as, ever present as those yes/no questions. So that was a long sweep of the examples. So hopefully you were able to stick through that, but there were lots of different sort of question types here, which are important to discuss. Now, following this, I want to talk about the timing. So pay attention to this because this is actually very important as well. So the timing is actually so important for this, okay? So I realize now, actually, I don't think I made errors. I think I'm using Canva right now for this, and it's actually glitching because I do remember putting a decimal point there, but I'll fix it and try to make sure it's clear for later. So for the timing, so as I mentioned, you have 32 minutes to answer 29 questions. That's in Australia. You have 31 in the UK. And with maths, 1.103 minutes per question, 66.2 seconds per question. And it's just commonly simplified to over 1 minute per question, considering 32 minutes. And actually also it's for 31 minutes as well. So pretty much the general mode is that you have around a minute per question. That's the way you want to interpret that. But then the thing is that what's actually important to note right here, and I'll go on this later in another video, is the fact that it's each question type themselves actually have vastly different timings, and that's based off complexity, so how hard the questions are, and mark values, because the thing is that actually different questions, I'll go on this in a moment, have different mark values. Literally, some questions are worth more than others, and that's actually very important to discuss. So this is very important here to the next one here. So you only want to consider 1 minute per question, that average right there, as being only a very general guide for timing the UCAT. You want to be like, oh, I've done this question in a minute. I'm doing well. I've done this question in a minute. Oh, damn, I'm not going that well. It's a very general guide, and you need to actually consider the timings individually for each type of question. So you don't consider it as 1 minute per question, literally. You consider this question as 30 seconds, this question as 1:30, this question as 2 minutes. And overall, the amount of time average is 1 minute per question. So that's the idea. Overall, just by pure division of all the questions, it's 1 minute. But question type by question type, you consider individually. And that is so important because the thing is that determines your technique and how you actually distribute your time, what questions you skip, and I'll talk about that in a later video. So there are also lots of optimal timings and everything for each question type. And it's not set. In this case, with the other overall timing, we could do division for that. But there's nothing really set. But then I've actually found there are very optimal timings based on my personal experience and those of my students. And I'll discuss those in a later video. But to give you guys a bit of a tidbit, for example, for those yes/no questions, you'd be spending around 1.5 to 2 minutes for them. And for the best argument questions, you'd be using 30 seconds for them. And you might be saying to yourself, but if they're worth similar marks and everything, why would I do that? And exactly. So I'll be talking about the techniques with that. Fun fact, Australian UCAT timing has increased from 31 minutes to 32 minutes for decision making. I thought that was just some interesting point to bring up because people just straight weren't finishing the decision making section on time. But in reality, I do think it's just a bit of a mistiming and mismanagement of time that leads you to sort of screw up in this aspect. Okay, so now marking. This is actually where it gets very interesting as well, because the thing is that it's similar to verbal reasoning. Decision making is marked similar to verbal reasoning in that it has a linear approach. So single mark right will have the same impact no matter what the overall score is. If you didn't watch the verbal reasoning video, what I mean is that sometimes for exams or something like that, you have scaling. So say you get 20 out of 35, that's around 50, doing the calculations, it's 57%. Then the thing is that you actually end up getting that scaled up to 80% or something like that. So that means that each mark value was worth around like 4% or something like that. But then the thing is, if you were to get like say 28, then out of 35, which is around 80%, then your mark gets scaled up to only 85%. So each mark right there now is only worth just above 3% right there, around 3.08333%. And the thing is that means that each mark has a different value. No, in this case, it's not like this in decision making or verbal reasoning. Each mark has the same exact worth no matter the overall score. But then the thing is that even though, this is important for techniques to discuss later, even though each mark individually is exactly the same, 1 mark is just worth 1 mark, all marks are the same, the yes/no questions actually have their weighting doubled by 2. So those yes/no questions, those 3 categories, the direct logical deductions, the comprehension ones with text, the graphical ones, they're worth double, okay? They're worth double, worth 2 marks instead of the 1. Otherwise, all the other questions are worth 1 mark, and that creates difficulties for time as well later. So the thing is that now it's worth 2 marks and everything, and it's worth 2 marks because they have multiple statements. And the thing is that because they're multiple statements as well, they want to remain fair. Because the thing is that you shouldn't be getting a 1 out of 5 and be scoring the same as, say, a 4 out of 5 on this 2-mark system. So actually, they sort of like fragment it and break it up and everything. And they assign marks based off the amount of statements you get correct. So if you get less than or equal to 3 correct, 0 marks, unfortunately. And I'll discuss as to why later in another video. 4 correct, 1 mark. 5 correct, 2 marks. It's not entirely proportional still, but at the same time, it's fair enough to sort of like really reward you if you can get it right. So what that means, very importantly for all of you, is that even though there are 29 questions in the overall section, with 9 yes and no questions worth double, so usually around 9. So it's taken as a bit of an average, but of course it can vary a bit, but usually they're around 9. The total mark range is not out of 29, but it's in fact out of 38. Okay. And now with the score range being from 300 to 900, overall 600 marks you sort of earn, that means that each is going to be worth 600, so 900 minus 300, and then all that divided by 38, 15.789 marks per question. But then obviously you want to consider that as a whole. You don't count, I've got 15.789 marks. The idea is that you actually consider it as one big picture sort of thing. So one big picture, kind of like, okay, well, I've got 20 and I times that by 15.789. And that means that, it's now like what, 315 marks or something like that. And that's the overall idea, okay? So you can consider it as whole and no backwards marking, so you don't lose marks if you get a question wrong. And I've never understood why that even exists in the first place. I really don't. And I've actually not seen a test which has actually had that yet. So if anyone has actually seen a test, let me know in the comments, because I'm actually very interested as to whether they actually have backwards marking. I don't understand why it ever would exist. But anyways, I want to show you guys a table now. So I'll show you guys sort of like, the scores that you sort of get for sort of decision-making scores and everything. And this is a table, and I don't know why tables do this, because the thing is that if you can easily calculate the fact that if there are like 9 questions for yes, no's, that means that's going to be worth around 38 now. So I don't know why you keep it as 29, but they do it anyways. I don't know why. But then the thing is that for these tables, they're scaled back to 29. And pretty much these are the scores that you sort of get for each mark range. As you can see right here, it's mostly linear. Of course, you have these sort of ranges right here where it's not really linear. It's just a bit more, like, I guess, exponential in that sort of regard. But for the most part, it's linear. But if you want to convert to that 38 factor, if you're doing a test yourself and you want to convert into that 38 factor, just simply do times all of these up by 1.31. So for example, if I had 20 right here, times it by 1.31 and he gets 26.2 or something like that. And pretty much the idea is that, okay, well, if you get 26.2 out of 38, that means you get 730 or something like that. It's not going to be exact, but that's the general range, okay? So there you go. Now, this is the sort of good stuff and everything. So it's what do you need to score? So this is a very important piece of discussion as well. I'm going to sort of like get you guys to calm down a little bit here and actually say, first of all, that unlike verbal reasoning, decision making is more considered an equal manner with other sections. It's more on the same level ground. It's not seen as like the extra important section or anything. It's around the same. So in Australia and the UK, weighting of decision making is actually equal to all other sections except for verbal reasoning and situational judgment. Fun fact for situational judgment for UK people, there is so much emphasis on situational judgment in the UK. Like you can actually get eliminated based on a poor situational judgment, and you can actually get in despite a mediocre score like 2600 with a very good situational judgment. And that's just down to like different philosophies of each country based on how they want to recruit. Clearly, Australia is a bit more academic and UK is a bit more like personal qualities and everything for that. So average not for verbal reasoning for decision making in Australia was 630. In the UK, the average was 610, more on the next page. But then I remind you guys, just like for verbal reasoning, above average, the slightly above average should not be the goal for Australians nor UK prospects and everything. Remember that in order to actually get into medicine in either Australia and even in the UK where it's a bit more lax, you need to be exceptional. And actually, I named the 90th percentile as a gauge because literally for most medicine universities in Australia, 90th percentile is the bare minimum. Okay, so since the 9th percentile for 2022 was 2980, it only makes logical sense that we just say we divide by 4 for the 4 sections that count into the overall score, 745. So 740, 750 would be a target score for the actual section. And actually, decision making is considered to be a saver section. So that means that I expect your score to be higher. What do I mean by saver section? It's basically a section that's meant to boost your other marks up because you're expected to have done bad, nearly score in other sections. So for verbal reasoning, you know that it's going to be a lower average. You saw the average is like 580 right there. The idea is that you want to have your decision making lift up your verbal reasoning. So it's a saver section. So you might want to aim for a bit higher than 740 or 750, okay? So UK is a bit more lax. Of course, the average is more like for medicine universities, 2,700, but I want to give you guys the full range. So I want to say that you should score 2,900 to be a top scoring threshold for most all universities and give you the highest chance of getting in. And if we take the average of that per section and everything for all the sections that count, you get 725, which would mean that 730 or 740 is a target. And again, it's a safer section. Try to aim a bit higher than that, okay? So here are sort of like the mean scores and everything. Now we're just looking down the decision making, and you can see that the overall average for Australia was 630. But at the same time, again, that's about getting the average. You need the 9th percentile to just simply get a chance. And you can see right here, 750, okay? That's a sort of 9th decile, 90th percentile. So that's sort of like the mark that I want you all to get. And mainly because it sort of goes to that 2980, 9th percentile minimum that you need to get into most universities in Australia. Notice as well how decision-making is higher than verbal reasoning and everything. It's a saver section. Your decision-making is meant to lift up your verbal reasoning. For example, for me, my decision-making kind of lifted up my verbal reasoning as well. Although, to be honest, the more saver sections are quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning. But, you know, you still don't want your decision-making to be a dead weight. You're meant to sort of help that bolster verbal reasoning, which is a section you're more expected to do poor in and everything, because it's just harder overall. Okay, keep pressing backwards by accidents. And we're going to go into the averages again. And yep, so the top bar shows here just averages for the UK, and for bottom, averages for Australia. You can see right here, it's just a bit higher than usual, you know, a bit higher than usual. As you can see right here, for the actual averages for decision making compared to verbal reasoning, and it's not too bad, 640 and everything, which is like, it's not a worthwhile score for getting to medicine, but it's just interesting to know these are the averages. But then again, you're meant to be aiming for 750 or 760, higher sorts of scores and everything, okay? But then this is a bit higher than verbal reasoning, and again, I say it's a saver section. Thank you to the Medic portal for providing these tables. Okay. So now, a final summary for decision making, okay? So just some points for today, some take-home messages. So decision making is just a section which fundamentally requires use of logical deductions or deductive reasoning to solve for a variety of different question types, okay? So many different question types using logic to solve them. 29 questions to be answered in 32 minutes for Australians, 31 minutes for UK prospects, just over a minute per question overall, in fact, for both timings and everything. Obviously a bit more for those with 32 minutes in Australia. So 10 different types of questions, some with different subtypes, and all the questions are revisable and practicable to a very high extent. You can maximize and do very well in this section by just simply practicing well and having access to the right resources, which hopefully you'll find through me. The timing is an average of 1 minute, and it should be used only very generally, that timing. The time for each question type varies massively, and I'm going to go through that in another video. Each mark for decision-making is worth the exact same, and each question is worth 1 mark, except for the yes-no questions. And these yes-no questions, they have their mark weighting actually doubled, okay? So pretty much each question is worth 1 mark, except for these yes-no ones, they're worth 2 marks and everything, okay? Weighting doubled. So the thing is that your ability to actually get these full 2 marks, though, it depends on how many statements you get right. We talked about how those marks are distributed earlier. And that means with all these everything and the doubling of marks, it just means that actually decision-making is more marked out of 38. For Australian medicine candidates, the goal score is 740, 750, but then again, aim high because it's a saver section. For UK medicine candidates, goal score is 730 or 740, but then aim higher because decision-making is a saver section. You've literally seen that people will do poorly in verbal reasoning, and obviously you're going to need sections to make up for that. Okay, cool. So now we just sort of wrap up and everything again, and I just want to remind you as well that I do offer private and group tutoring. You can access that link in order to find ways to contact me directly and inquire into private or UCAT tutoring, group UCAT tutoring services. If you're coming from YouTube, do let me know, and I'll be able to offer you a discount as well on the services that you are receiving. And I really hope you enjoyed today's video as well. So I haven't actually completed the entire quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning videos. In fact, even the situational judgment ones, but I'm just going to put fingers here as if I'm going to have them done soon enough. So if you want to actually watch the verbal reasoning video, please click here and I'll show you an introduction like this to verbal reasoning. The same thing for quantitative reasoning, we'll be able to find here. The same thing for abstract reasoning, we'll be able to find here. And the same thing for situational judgment will be able to be found here in the bottom right corner. The effect isn't actually the same because I can see that my screen is actually Okay, my screen is actually in the actual top right corner, something like that. So that's why it's not going to work. But pretty much anyways, just want to say, hope you enjoyed today's video. And it was a bit long, but it is a very comprehensive lesson. And I'm giving you guys a full tutorial. So that's why I really want to be as comprehensive as possible. So a daily reminder as well, in order to score 3,000 the UCAT, you need to score 3,600. Good to see you guys today. And I hope you guys tune in to the next video.